Aris is the editor-in-chief for BNE IntelliNews, which focuses on business news in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. And he joins us now live from Berlin. It's a pleasure to have you on the program today, sir. Now, there's no doubt that the sanctions that have been imposed on Russia so far will have a devastating effect on the country at some point in time. But currently, mainstream Russians are having to deal with major companies freezing their operations across the country. And this isn't only having an economic impact with having some Russians be jobless from these decisions these companies are making, but also a psychological impact is bearing on them, having Russia be more isolated with time.
Yeah, it's building up steadily and quickly, although it's still only 3 weeks into it. The economic impacts on Russia are already being felt. Immediately, the ruble's devalued, it's lost a third of its value, and then that's devalued everybody's savings being held in rubles. And moreover, a lot of people were holding their savings in dollars in bank accounts, but the SWIFT sanctions, the banning of the use of the international money transfer service, means that those dollars have been frozen by the central bank. It's not letting people access to them because a run on the bank could cause them to collapse because the amount of dollars cash banks hold is not enough. But the unemployment is only going to grow. We're already, there's been something like 300 foreign companies have already pulled out or suspended. And that's immediately translated into an extra 100,000 people on the dole queue. However, those companies collectively, foreign companies, employ some 5 million Russians. And if that stays locked down, if they stay suspended, then you're talking that's 10% of the workforce. So unemployment is going to spike. And I was just talking to acquaintances in Moscow at the weekend, and the small businesses are all in trouble already, and many of them are already starting to go bust. So there's a shock here for the Russians, where they're starting to feel the impact of this. I mean, it's got to the point where there's now a shortage not only of sugar, which everybody's been reporting, but quality office paper. One entrepreneur I talked to said he can't get hold of paper because it's all imported from Finland, simply to print out, bills and receipts. It's starting to get very extreme. And as I say, after only 3 weeks, it's going very fast.
Wow. Now, before crossing to you, I was speaking with our reporter Jack Perrick out of Brussels, where EU ministers are conducting meetings for a fifth set of sanctions to be imposed on Russia. But for obvious reasons, they're being very careful when it comes to sanctioning Russian gas and oil. Do you think the EU will risk it at this point in the conflict and agree on blocking Russian gas and oil into the country? Their countries?
They're two different things. I think oil ban is possible, in so much as oil is transported by ship, and so it's possible to get oil from elsewhere, although there are various issues with the refineries in Europe are set up to deal with Russian oil because there's a specific sulfur content. So it's not that simple to just simply replace Russian oil with, say, Saudi oil, but it is possible. The gas is much more complicated because gas is piped. There's a limited amount that goes by ship on LNG ships, but there's simply not enough global production to entirely replace what Russia sends to Europe, gas with LNG. So talking to the various energy analysts, they're saying it is possible to cut Russian gas off, but then Europe would have to go into a wartime mentality. It would have to restart coal plants. It would have to ration power. People would have to turn their thermostats down. You could possibly see rolling blackouts. So it's a real extreme. It would mean a complete step up in mentality where European public would have to get involved. And of course, the bills would go through the roof. I mean, they're already extremely high, having doubled or trebled. And if you cut Russian gas off, you're talking about 16, 20 times increase, and the government would have to put a cap on that because of the political problems, which would be a huge drain in revenue for every government. So like I say, we'd have to be effectively in a war mentality in order to be able to even contemplate doing something like that.
Right. Now, looking at the course of this conflict and the assistance that Ukraine has received so far from the West and the EU, what worries you the most?
That it escalates, that there's a peace deal going on at the moment, and the comments we're hearing coming out of that is they're making positive progress. However, the sticking point remains the status of Crimea and the two Donbass so-called autonomous republics. And Putin's been following a very transparent plan whereby each round of diplomacy, there's a pause for talks. If he doesn't get what he wants, then he escalates. And in this fourth round that we're seeing, the pictures you're showing from Mariupol and Kharkiv, our correspondent is there at the moment, and it's also being shelled continuously. And it keeps going up, and Putin is effectively destroying Ukraine city by city. And I'm afraid the next stage will be, if these talks fail, that they'll start pounding Kiev, and you'll have massive destruction, and the death toll will go from several thousand into the tens of thousands. And it comes down to this negotiation, to what extent Putin's dug his heels in and is going to insist on everything on his list being delivered. Ukraine's already conceded that they won't join NATO and it will become neutral. That was the main demand. Putin's already got what he came in for, but now he's asking for all these other things, like to take control of the Donbass, like Ukraine to recognize Crimea.
Right.
And if he's clever, he should compromise, but I don't know he will. He seems to be going to extremes.
All right, the editor-in-chief for BNE IntelliNews, Ben Aris, thank you so much for joining us here on the NewsHour and sharing that information with us.